This is the second installment of the Who Was the Kosher Jesus series, video series. Today, I just want to look a little bit at what Rabbi Boteach is saying inspired him to differentiate between the Jesus of Christian mythology and the historical Jewish Jesus. Well, let me see. Let me see if he, in fact, says this in the beginning. I think he does. But his, here we go. Right in the beginning, in the introduction. Who was Jesus of Nazareth? Which I would go much, much further than Rabbi Boteach, but this is something for other videos, really. I would even question whether we can speak about a Jesus of Nazareth in the first place. Certainly a historical Jesus, but I don't take it for granted that Jesus was from Nazareth. I think there's some evidence that he had a circle around himself in Nazareth, in the Galil, and he may have even come from a working class day laborer background. I think that's probable. He was probably some sort of builder with his father, who may or may not have been named Joseph. He could have simply been seen by his followers as one of the dual messiahs, as Mashiach ben Yosef, who is mentioned throughout rabbinic literature, who is mentioned in the Talmud, and this is and the Dead Sea Scrolls, Hazan Gavriel, and all of these, all sorts of sources. This is not a new idea. It's not a Christian idea. In fact, Christianity amalgamates the two Jewish messiahs into one Messiah, who's both Ben Yosef and Ben David. But the big important thing to realize here, let me tend to the baby back there for a second. The big important thing is that, at least on this page, is that Rabbi Boteach is influenced to do this work. Bear with me a second. I got a newborn back there. He's waking up a little bit. He's influenced to do this work of historical Jesus research, even though it's somewhat tame. In some ways, I think he doesn't go far enough. But, we can agree on a number of things. And more importantly, we can agree on some semblance of methodology and the concept that we are approaching Jesus as a historical individual and as historians ourselves, rather than as a theological, mythological creation and entity, and thus approaching him as theologians. So, Hyam Maccoby is actually, he's a preeminent Anglo-Jewish scholar. He's well known amongst British Jewry, and he wrote extensively on the historical Jesus. So he says here, Rabbi Boteach, my opinions on Jesus have been profoundly shaped by the writings of Hyam Maccoby and his compelling insight into the historical Jesus. This book would not have been possible without Mr. Maccoby's work, which serves as a pivotal foundation and central pillar for what follows here. More than any other work of scholarship, Maccoby's books get to the very heart of the historical Jesus. I disagree with that, but his books are good. And I am profoundly indebted to him for his lifelong research. His insights, more than anyone else's, have illuminated for me the real truth of the Jewish Jesus, and I strongly encourage the reader to dip directly into his texts, as even this book is an insufficient substitute. Okay, so I agree with that. I don't agree that more than any other author, Hyam Maccoby's books elucidate the historical Jesus, but perhaps more than most other books, they elucidate the Pharisaic side of Jesus' teaching. So perhaps more than any other book, Hyam Maccoby's works, and the Mythmaker, I think in particular, is a great one that elucidates the Pharisaic side of Jesus. I don't agree with all of his conclusions. There is a great book on historical Jesus research called Who's Historical Jesus? And in it, it's a compilation of scholarly essays from journals and some written just for the book on how who we are colors how we see Jesus. So some people see Jesus the cynic, as in with a capital C, in terms of philosophical cynics. Not that he was just cynical like Darlene from Roseanne or something. And some people will see an Essenic Jesus, some people will see a Pharisaic Jesus, and so on. That is not to say that it's all subjective. Nobody sees a Sadducean Jesus. Nobody sees a Jesus that teaches that we should hate our neighbor or anything like that, or that husbands should beat their wives, or there are certain things that everybody is in agreement on that Jesus was not. Now, what I think that work emphasizes the most is the multifaceted nature of Jesus, just as anybody is multidimensional, multifaceted, any historical individual. And actually, we have more information on this personality than we have on many other rabbis from the era, or some might say proto-rabbis. So I don't discount the Pharisaic side of Jesus. He was certainly had a strong Pharisaic emphasis, but Hyam Maccoby is probably, and Rabbi Boteach as well, are probably not overemphasizing that Pharisaic side and nature of Jesus, but probably focusing on it, hyper-focusing on it to the exclusion of his other influences, philosophical influences in the case of cynicism, as if he was indeed of Nazareth in the Galil, he would have, and if he was indeed a day laborer, he would have been gaining his primary employment with his father and whatnot from the Greek-speaking city of Sepphoris. So there would have been a profound and widespread influence of Greek culture and Greek thought. And just like we see with the Rambam, there's not this aversion to accept truth as expressed by Greek-speaking people. This just wasn't the case. Of course, we have a very different image of Judea and the Galilee in 1st century CE. And a lot of this is largely due to the limitations of the past generation of scholars who simply didn't know. They were trying to set the historical stage, so they emphasized things like the Aramaic vernacular and so on, but they didn't emphasize the fact that there was Greek vernacular. Many cities where people knew Aramaic Greek, and within the context of the Jewish religion, knew Hebrew liturgically and otherwise. So it wasn't as though it was like Mel Gibson's Passion of the Christ, everybody speaking just Aramaic, except for the Romans. There were certainly Jewish nationalists who probably avoided speaking Greek like the plague. Just like in certain areas, barrios and so on, and California, a lot of the people there are going to speak Spanish as a matter of cultural pride, even though Spanish itself is a language of the conquistador. But relative to the American experience, the folks there are going to see it as a source of national pride and will speak Spanish. So it was kind of like that amongst some people with regard to Aramaic, and in some regions. But in other larger cities, it just simply wasn't the case. And Jesus almost certainly would have been known as Jesus, not Yeshua, in Sepphoris. So this might surprise some people who want to imagine that accounts of the Markan account, the Matthean account, the Lucan account, and the Johannite account were originally all written in Hebrew, and you see that with quote unquote messianic communities, that they're now taking to making a translation from the English and Greek into Hebrew and then back into English. And while there is evidence, including testimonies of a historical original Hebrew Matthew or Aramaic, depending on who you ask, actually a slight majority of the early church fathers say Hebrew, some say Aramaic. Nobody says that about the rest of the Gospels. Now, you can tell a lot from the Greek in these Gospels, and this is a whole subject unto itself. You can tell a lot that you can tell that the person writing Mark in Greek was not a native Greek speaker, and the structure of the sentences and how they begin with "and" is Semitic itself. With Luke, it's absolutely the opposite case. The preamble is in perfect, almost purchased Greek. Later, it's just in good Greek. Luke Acts, that is. John, there's no question. John, the author, probably didn't even know Hebrew. It quotes from the Rig Veda in the beginning. It's blending Gnostic elements with Pauline sort of mystery religion elements of how Jesus had become appropriated. And it's just very different. But, so what Hyam Maccoby does here is he does very effectively present that Pharisaic side of Jesus.